Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. If you are joining us for the first time on one of our webinars, a special welcome to you. And if you have attended a previous webinar with us, then welcome back. This is the Elder Justice Initiative webinar on the role of law enforcement in elder abuse cases. As with all technology, we may at some point experience a momentary lapse in the webinar session. In the event of a problem, please be patient, remain with us. The webinar should resume shortly. I do want to take a moment here to make sure that everyone is connected and can, and if you do have a problem, please type a private chat message to the technical specialist, Danielle, in the feedback box. That's the chat feature found on your lower right. If you cannot access the chat, you can also send an email to Danielle at dmclean@ovcttac.org. If you do have questions throughout the webinar, we invite you to use the chat box to type them. We will address as many questions as we can towards the end of the webinar when we have a Q&A session. So the Elder Justice Initiative has put together a series of webinars for various audiences working in the field of elder abuse and justice. Please note that today's session is being recorded and will be made available on both the OVC TTAC training website and the Elder Justice website. You can view a list of upcoming webinars or the previously recorded webinars at the website found on the screen at www.justice.gov/elderjustice/webinars. So we invite you to visit that and view the recorded webinars from previous sessions and also view the upcoming webinars. So at this time, I'm going to turn things over to our host, Yolanda Campbell, an attorney with the U.S. Department of Justice. Yolanda.
Thank you. Everyone, welcome. We're happy to have you today, and hopefully you'll find this webinar informative. So just before we get into the meat of the webinar, I just wanted to remind everyone that there are resources on elderjustice.gov that are provided by the Elder Justice Initiative on our website, and this is just a screenshot. There's resources specific for law enforcement officials to utilize. So there's different toolkits, there's different trainings you can all reference, there's different articles, and so we highly recommend if you have time to go ahead and check out the website. And then in addition to the website and in addition to this training, we have a number of different resources that we are in the midst of developing for law enforcement related to elder abuse. There's going to be, as you can see on the slide, there's going to be a law enforcement web module, some elder abuse roll call videos, dispatcher training. The COPS office here at DOJ is working on an elder abuse project, and we have this online training for advanced law enforcement, and then financial crimes against seniors in-person law enforcement training. And so those are all in development, and we will be providing you all with more information as we near completion on those. So today's webinar is really focused on the role of law enforcement in elder abuse cases, and we have two guest speakers here today. The first speaker is Dr. Payne, and he's the Vice Provost at Old Dominion University, and he's going to talk about law enforcement research and tips for law enforcement with respect to elder abuse cases. And then our second speaker today is Detective Mike Day of the Vancouver Police Department. And his portion of the presentation is really going to focus on an introductory level overview for law enforcement in dealing with the initial elder abuse investigation calls. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic over to Dr. Payne.
Great. Thank you, Yolanda. And it is quite an honor to be here talking about this important topic today. It's something that I've been studying for probably almost 25 years now, and I was particularly interested in elder abuse, and my initial interest was about crimes in nursing homes, and I had done research on medical crimes. But early on, I noticed that crimes against older persons were much bigger than this nursing home issue, and in fact, the vast majority of crimes, I quickly learned, and abuse cases didn't occur in nursing homes. But looking at it from a criminological lens, for me, it's been an interesting experience. Early on, I wanted to do some research on crimes against older victims, and I looked to the criminal justice research, and I saw that criminal justice professors and criminal justice classes really didn't spend a lot of time talking about older victims. And in fact, when I looked at the research that was being done, and I looked at the courses that were being taught and the types of classes that I was even teaching, we often talked about younger victims. We talked about crimes by younger people against younger people, but there was very little done about older victims. And when I started looking at this research that was being done, much of it was being done by social workers, much of it being done by gerontologists, much of it being done by healthcare researchers, very, very little being done, though, by people that were connected more to a law enforcement research angle. So I had done a little bit of research, and I thought I want to write a book on this. So I sent out book proposals to some criminal justice publishers, and one of the reviews that came back was this topic isn't worth publishing because it's not that big of a problem. And it really very much concerned me that that was the feedback I was getting from other criminologists who thought when they look at criminal justice data, which the official data shows there is much more crime among younger people, but it really did concern me that criminologists weren't really, from my perspective, seeing the true issue or the true problem that elder abuse, I think, is. So I fortunately found another publisher that was willing to work with me, and then have done a number of studies on law enforcement and elder abuse using different methodologies, everything from surveys to interviews to analysis of case data. I have not done police ride-alongs, and it is one of those things that when we look at elder abuse research, I think there's a couple of reasons why we don't see as much law enforcement elder abuse research as we do see law enforcement research on other topics. And one of those is it's just not, to the traditional criminal justice researcher, they may not find it as compelling or as for lack of a better word, as interesting as other types of opportunities for research. But I think that actually creates an important need and an important vacuum that we'll talk about. So with that, what I would like to, with my brief introduction, I would like to do a poll so we have an idea about who all is here. If you could just let us know your professional background so we can have an idea of the mix of folks we have here. It looks like we've got some fairly good representation across the occupations that would be involved in responding to older victims when law enforcement gets involved. It's interesting. I was just thinking of a presentation I was at about 15 years ago or so where a police officer asked a group of us, how many of you are victim advocates? And a couple of people raised their hands, and at the end of the after they raised their hand, his next statement was, by the time I'm done talking, I hope that you'll all answer that you're a victim advocate. So it is an interesting take on how we think about our roles. And with this nice variation in backgrounds we have here, I think we'll have some important things to think about. So my objectives for this presentation, if we could go back to the PowerPoint. My objectives for the presentation is that hopefully when I'm done presenting, you'll be able to identify common problems that come up in elder abuse cases. I'm going to talk some about, because there's been so little research on elder abuse, I think what police departments, an opportunity that exists is for them to do assessments in their own department of how we could respond to elder abuse, and I think you'll be able to conduct one of those assessments at the end of this presentation. We'll identify both effective and ineffective responses to elder abuse, and hopefully you'll be able to identify some tips for better responding to elder abuse cases, as well as some suggestions for how one of the key themes that we'll see in all of the elder abuse law enforcement research studies that have been done that I've seen is that they almost all end with the same conclusion, and that is that we need to work together in responding to elder abuse, that no one group, no one occupation can address these cases on their own, and I think you'll be able to identify some of those strategies for collaborating in elder abuse cases. So with that, I did a study about a decade ago where I was working with a graduate student, and she was interested in how elder abuse was portrayed in the media. So we did a rather simple study and went to LexisNexis, and we searched for news articles about elder abuse over this time frame. It was 1999 to 2003. And what you'll see there is that the number of elder abuse news articles in these different newspapers that, based upon this search that we found, and clearly the West Coast was publishing more articles about elder abuse, and we made a couple of guesses as far as why that is. It could be that we do know there are some very strong elder abuse prosecution units out in California, and that could be reflected there. Better understanding of the problem could be reflected there. Some might ask, does that mean that these cases aren't occurring? And the next thing we did in this research is that we compared the number of elder abuse articles to the number of child abuse articles in these same newspapers over the same time frame. And it was somewhat stunning to me to see how many articles there were about child abuse compared to elder abuse. Now, this comparison doesn't mean that one is worse than the other, and I don't mean to diminish one or the other, but what we would ask ourselves is, and what we asked in our project is, why is it that child abuse cases get so much media attention and elder abuses don't seem to get that attention? And again, we come back to the fact that it did vary across newspapers, but for all of the newspapers, there was very little attention to elder abuse in comparison to child abuse. Now, if you're like my students, you may not have held a newspaper in your hands recently, but you may be wondering, how would it differ today? So not long ago, it was about a year ago, I was working with a graduate student expanding on this, where we dug into Google and web searches to see how much attention is elder abuse getting through the different web services. And what we found, it may seem like a lot, 2 million Google hits. Now it's actually gone up since then. I checked just the other day, but still 10 times fewer hits on elder abuse than child abuse in Google and Google News. And then when we look at dissertations, fewer dissertations by researchers on elder abuse than on child abuse. When you look at all these different types of media, books, and so on, again, much less attention to elder abuse than child abuse. What does this mean? What it means is we don't have a lot of information about elder abuse available to police officers, to law enforcement, making decisions about how they're going to respond to elder abuse. We don't have as much information for the other providers, victim services, social workers, medical providers, and so on. And this lack of information can present issues, and it can actually result in us having to be more proactive in deciding how we're going to respond to elder abuse in our law enforcement arena. One study I did, it's probably 7 or 8 years ago or so, was a study on, we looked at how much information adult protective service workers knew about different elder abuse topics, and we compared that with how much information they thought they needed to know about this topic. And this is significant because the blue line here shows how much, information in this case, the adult protective service workers thought they needed to know about the topic, and the pink line shows how much they actually knew about the topic. And so anywhere that the pink line is above the blue line means that they know enough. Anywhere that the pink line is below the blue line, that means they don't know enough about the adult protective service workers didn't know enough about interviewing perpetrators, or didn't know enough about protecting or promoting their own safety, and those sorts of topics. Now, you may be wondering, why am I sharing this when we're talking about law enforcement? Well, the very subsequent study I did with another colleague in public health was looking at how much law enforcement officers know about elder abuse in comparison to how much they thought they knew or they needed to know about elder abuse. Now, with the adult protective services, you see there are many areas where they said, yeah, we know plenty, and there were a few areas where they said they don't need enough. Here's what we found with the police officers. They admitted saying, we just plain don't know enough. We don't have enough knowledge about the basic dynamics of elder abuse. We don't have enough knowledge about the theoretical perspectives on elder abuse. And every single item, they said they did not have enough knowledge that they thought they needed to know about elder abuse. And if you think back to the prior chart, again, it's a quite stark contrast where the blue line being completely above the pink line, showing that they are recognizing the need for more knowledge. So with that, I think it's incumbent on researchers to work with law enforcement to help provide that knowledge, and myself and some other researchers have done just that. Some of the surveys I've done and interviews that I've done with law enforcement and others working with law enforcement, we've identified several problems that law enforcement confronts regularly when they do respond to elder abuse cases. The one problem that comes up probably most often is funding. Funding just, it's probably a problem that comes up with just about any issue we're addressing in criminal justice, but as well the problem of awareness, as you saw coming out in the training surveys, that officers recognizing that they don't know what they need to know about elder abuse. They also talk about, officers too, that there's a fear of reporting among victims, among family members, among those who are potential reporters of elder abuse. They're afraid that more harm than good could come from reporting, when in fact that's usually not the case. Law enforcement also will encounter delays in reporting, where the longer that a victim waits to report a crime or a victimization, the less likely that that case will be cleared or resolved. These cases are also often very complex, much more complex than a traditional crime in terms of who the victim is, who the offender is, what issues arise, what laws would be applied, and those sorts of things. There's also court obstacles that come up in terms of getting the witnesses to court, and the witnesses and victims may have issues that may make it harder to get them to court. In some cases, there may be minor losses in these cases in comparison to other crimes, and it may be harder for law enforcement to move that case along because it's seen as less serious. In cases in which a caregiver is involved, there may be offender sympathy, or some in the system may think that the caregiver's behavior was rationalized. There is a level of ageism that still is ongoing in our society, where we see older people differently than we see younger people, and we may be devaluing them. And then secrecy here within the family. When the abuse happens, they are very reluctant to bring the justice process into the family discussion. Additional problems, the whole notion of time and getting the cases resolved in a quick way becomes an issue. There's police officers and prosecutors have told me about proof problems, is what I call them, proving that the crime occurred, proving intent on the part of the offender, proving that the victim is competent and able to participate in the criminal justice process, are types of proof problems that don't come up necessarily in other types of traditional crimes. There's also related to that witness problems in terms of where you have older witnesses and they have memory problems or they have cognitive problems that can be problematic to respond to the cases. There's also what I call relational issues. If it is an adult caregiver, if it's a son, if it's a daughter, if it's a relative, family members don't like to bring the criminal justice system into those issues, and in fact they resist that, and that can be problematic for law enforcement. Legal issues simply refers to the sheer number of laws that are out there related to elder abuse. And Detective Day is going to talk about some of these, but it's just, I think it's important to recognize that no one can be expected to know all of these laws, and there are people that specialize in each area. But law enforcement in particular would be focusing on the traditional criminal laws and their application. And it is, again, important to be aware of how they might apply, and they might apply differently. The criminal law, the penalty enhancement law, and the mandatory reporting laws are the ones that are probably most important for law enforcement. Now, in terms of law enforcement assessment, what I would suggest using the problem-oriented policing and the Center for Problem-Oriented Policing, their activities as a guide, is that law enforcement agencies can take it upon themselves and do their own assessments of elder abuse to determine how much elder abuse, how they should be responding to elder abuse using their own assessments. And they can look at their data, they can look at how many instances of elder physical abuse are occurring, they can distinguish between the different types of abuse, they can look at what type of harm they've been experiencing, they can compare that to all of the types of cases that they've been confronting and looking to see what dynamics they've seen. They also would want to, I think, look at how well they're working with adult protective services and how many of those reports of elder abuse do they pass on to elder abuse protective services. They also, in doing their assessment, I think, could look at things like their community and how many, it's going to vary from community to community, how many older people live in their community, what's the proportion of them that are married, how many live in private residence, how many live in apartments, single family, and so on. Among those that they know are victims, how many of them live alone, and just getting a sense of the demographic makeup of older victims so that they know, if they know that, then they can know how they should be allocating their resources. Now, in addition to the law enforcement assessment, I think it's also important to do a community assessment where law enforcement looks outside of their own agency to see how the community is responding to elder abuse. And they can ask questions about how much resources are devoted in APS and how Adult Protective Services is involved in responding to these cases, and being familiar with how the laws are written about elder abuse in each state. And the Elder Justice Initiative site has a number of details that can help law enforcement answer these sorts of questions, and whether the agency is involved with community efforts to reduce isolation and these sorts of questions. I think, again, looking at our community to see what types of framework our communities established to help protect victims. There's also questions about the types of domestic violence shelters that are available, because in many cases the traditional domestic violence shelter isn't going to work for older victims, and we want to be familiar with what's available for these older victims. We want to know about what we can do instead of arresting offenders, because I'll mention in a moment is that isn't always the best case. And all of these types of questions, again, are, I think, useful in helping to get a general sort of 30,000-foot view of how are we prepared to respond to elder abuse. And these questions I've published on a report for problem-oriented policing that can be, again, used to do this type of assessment. In terms of what works to respond to elder abuse, things that work well are working together. and improving the understanding of elder abuse through collaboration works well. Having policies and protocol that are specifically designed for communicating the importance of elder abuse, customizing responses for police responses so that we're not using a child abuse response, but we're using a response that is based upon the victim's age and their life course, and also doing things in the community to reduce those community and cultural factors. Specific things like checking on older folks at home, undertaking community outreach, participating in elder abuse centers, doing background checks, participating on fatality review teams. These have shown to be effective in past research. What have not been shown to be effective are laws and policies that are passed in isolation from the older population. Mandatory arrest and prosecution policies don't by themselves work in all of these cases. In fact, in some cases, police may be called to respond to a situation where it's actually an older person being violent because of Alzheimer's or dementia, and we definitely don't want to punish or arrest in those cases, and we don't want to build models that are based upon child abuse. So in responding to these cases, I would say look for a smoking gun, find something that shows that the crime occurred. Where there's one offender, there's usually two offenders or two offenses is a theme we find in these cases. If there are two offenders, to work with the least culpable offender first makes sense. To identify the goals of the case, it might not be arrest or prosecution. Victim safety may be the most important thing, and to work with APS, to collaborate. Now, when I talk about collaboration, I always share these principles of collaboration, and I'm not going to go into them in detail right now, but when I share these with my students, I talk about how the importance of communicating, being objective, having a leader, and but just as important as this last idea, when we collaborate, we have to try new things. And sometimes trying new things isn't that hard to do. It's just a click of the mouse, and suddenly we have a new way to look at things. And so with elder abuse, again, it is incredibly important that we collaborate, we work together between law enforcement, medical providers, victim assistance, social work, healthcare, and so on to make the world safer for our older population. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Detective Day, who's going to talk about the elder abuse investigation.
Detective Day, I think you might be on mute.
Can you hear me now?
There we
Hello?
go.
Yes,
Thanks.
we can.
Hi, sorry about that. My name is Detective Mike Day. I'm with the Vancouver Police Department in Washington State. I want to thank you for this opportunity to discuss the elder abuse investigation as far as from a general or initial approach in law enforcement. I've been in law enforcement for 25 years. I've worked at the federal level as a special agent. I've also worked at the local level as a patrol officer and detective, working in various fields such as domestic violence, elder abuse, property crimes, person crimes, street crimes, drug enforcement, etc. And I want to thank Brian for his great presentation. I would like to reiterate from Brian's presentation that we are definitely in need of more education and training in the elder abuse, vulnerable adult area. Just as a statistic there is that for every one case reported, another 23 cases never come to light, according to the New York Department for Aging lifespan in 2011. And that's the problem, is that we don't have a ton of research that's current. It's usually a few years old or several years old. But with that, we are trying to get working as fast as possible to overcome some of these obstacles. So let's get into, so as my overview, getting into the definitions, patrol, we'll be talking about as an officer, how that looks, Adult Protective Services and the Elder Justice Center where I work. So I think it's important on the onset to go into definitions to understand what exactly we're talking about when we get into the elder/vulnerable adult. In the state of Washington, we have enhancements for the elderly, but there is an actual specific section for a vulnerable adult. There are 7 areas which define a vulnerable adult, but primarily on there, that letter A and letter C is what law enforcement deals with. A person that's 60 years of age or older, functional, mental, or physical inability to care for himself or herself, and a developmental disability. As an elderly person, that is, depending on who you talk to, can be categorized in a person that's 55, 60, or 62 or 65 years of age. What is a fiduciary? Fiduciary is someone, in essence, the definition is up there from the freedictionary.com, but is a person who is a trusted person who takes care of your financial portfolio. That could be a professional person or a private person, such as a friend or relative. A power of attorney. These are frequently enacted on somebody that is an elderly or vulnerable adult, more so with an elderly person. Usually the cognitive and may or may not be there. But a power of attorney, or POA for short, it is not a court-ordered or authorized document. This is something that you can simply go online and draw from a myriad of different forms, as Washington State has that. An officer who comes across the document needs to understand, or to be able to look carefully in the document as to what the document states, what the attorney or attorney-in-fact can actually do or cannot do, as this document may be only for financial, or only for medical, or for both. And depending on what the officer comes across, he or she will need to understand what authority that person has. For guardianship, this is actually a court-ordered process, which starts with the guardian ad litem, and then through the court process proceeds into a full guardianship. As definition by the Washington courts there, it's somebody that's to take care of an incapacitated person. It also could be for a child, but we're primarily focusing on the elder abuse. The other thing is that a guardianship can be introduced or initiated by Adult Protective Services, or a social worker from a hospital can initiate that as well. We have in Washington State, I don't know other states what they have, if it's the same verbiage, but we have a vulnerable adult protection order. This is an order that is paramount when it comes to a vulnerable adult. When an officer comes out to a scene and initially doesn't have maybe the evidence or the circumstances to rise to a criminal conduct, we're as law enforcement, I got to be honest, we're at an impasse. Either we try to pass the assistance to Adult Protective Services or to another agency, but as far as from the law enforcement looking at it for a criminal procedural order for the prosecution of the suspect, if we don't have that, we're at a loss. This order right here is something that can assist us in that, because there is no black and white anymore. I'm sorry, it is very black and white. There's no gray area anymore. The Vulnerable Adult Protection Order, or the VAPO, is there to protect the victim from the suspect by not having any direct contact or third-party contact, and again, violating the order will be automatic jail for the suspect. So it is very helpful when other avenues are not available. And again, that is court ordered. So now let's talk about what it means from a patrol perspective. So everybody knows that when they call 911, a dispatcher answers and then they get information. Then that information is transferred either to emergency medical services or to law enforcement. So you get a call, 911 call as an officer. This call is for you to go contact a victim in regards to maybe a theft or exploitation or something like that. Or maybe you don't know exactly what it is yet. The call will have in it stating who the victim is, where you need to go, and what is apparently the issue that's there. So from a patrol officer's perspective, what is the address where you're going to? Is it a residence where the victim is and they're on their own or self-sufficient? Is it an assisted living facility? Is it an emergency department at a hospital, adult family home, skilled nursing facility? With this information, that will be able to provide the officer the ability to assess a little bit more of what the victim's circumstances are. And again, on the onset, as when the officer arrives, the paramount thing is to make sure that the victim is safe. With that, that will help to overcome some obstacles in the future, such as dementia or power of attorney or consent. As a side note on the consent, we talk about how the elderly have different things occur to them. One of them is a scam, and I just recently had an investigation where an elderly man about 85 years of age knew he was being phone scammed, and they were asking initially for $500 and then $700 and $1,000, and I think he was into them for almost $20,000. However, there was no cognitive impairment on his part, and he understood that it was a phone scam, but he just couldn't let it go because he said it may be just that one phone call where he's going to win the sweepstakes or that lottery and then cash in on that prize. And I explained to him that, yes, this is a scam, that he is a victim, and he needs to understand that. And he says, I totally understand. And because, but you don't understand what's the difference between me going to the brand new casino that just opened up in Clark County or this phone scam. At that point, there wasn't really anything I could say. I agree with you. Both of them are a gamble. So other than one is definitely a violation of law. So again, we're there to assist, but we can't force somebody that doesn't have an impairment or doesn't have any issues. If we determine that they're a vulnerable adult, the officer out there, then that means that they might have a case manager or a social worker or a guardian. The officer can then get in touch with that person to obtain further information or background from the case manager or social worker, etc., as far as diagnosis or how long they've been in the system, what care they're already providing or receiving. Who's the one who actually reported the incident? Was it actually the victim or was it a different third party? Is the reporting party, is that a relative who's trying to get other relatives in trouble, i.e. one sibling trying to get another sibling in trouble for purposes of getting on the better side of the victim, or trying to ingratiate themselves to slip in and take the money that the older or vulnerable adult has? In fact, I have a plaque in my office which states, where there is a will, there's a family fighting over it. It's a sad statement, but it is very true, unfortunately. And then lastly is that the officer needs to determine if this is going to be a civil issue or if this is going to be a criminal investigation. Is this something that Resources can be provided if it's not going to be a criminal investigation, or is it domestic violence in nature, where they can be directed towards some assistance on that. So what types of crimes would the patrol officer encounter? Well, there are many different types, but I think that the most common types would be the assault, theft, neglect, exploitation, or sexual assault. I'd throw in the sexual assault because it's very important, and it would be in there, but the majority of them would be the assault, or the top four there. So when you get into, as an officer, looking into the assault, what intent did the suspect have to assault the victim? Is this, am I going to a memory care facility where all of the clients within the facility in this locked facility have dementia or Alzheimer's and can't remember from 10 minutes ago to not even a day ago? This would have a serious effect on our ability to prosecute, depending on the severity of an assault. Does the suspect have the cognitive ability to understand perfectly what they did? Does the victim have cognitive issues? For myself here is that in the unit we only take felonies, so does that mean that it's going to go to a different unit if it's a misdemeanor assault versus a felony assault? How about theft? So when it comes to financial cases, my mantra is, what authority does the suspect have to the money? And that usually will tell you exactly what you need to know when it comes to the financial issues. Is the suspect a friend or a relative, a caregiver? What access do they have to the money? Where has the money gone? Is it from the residence? Is it from a financial institution being hacked or going into the actual account itself? For instance, I had one case where I had a daughter who moved her father into the same apartment complex where she lived. She intercepted all of his mail, appointed herself as a contact person for her dad, although she was not POA, and entrusted herself to him so that she could get into her father's investment account, where during the course of 14 months she stole $917,000. Again, she isolated him so that she would be the only person there to be able to take care of him and make sure that he wasn't receiving any of his bank statements, that she wasn't, that she was the person to contact, so she would intercept all phone calls to him. So let's get into neglect. Are the basic necessities there for the person? And when I mean basic necessities of life, is that does the victim have food, water, shelter, clothing, or medical necessary health care? Is the suspect a parent of a vulnerable adult, or is it somebody who has assumed the responsibility over the victim, or somebody who's employed to provide the basic necessities of life to the victim, i.e. a caregiver or somebody of that? When you go into the residence, what you're looking for is how does the residence look? What's the appearance of the victim? Is the victim disheveled? Is the house ransacked in essence? Is there any food in the pantry or the cupboard? When was the last time that they had medical attention? Getting it into exploitation. What role does the suspect play in this financial exploitation? Where are they? Are they a power of attorney? Are they a guardian? Are they caregivers? Is that a certified nursing assistant, RN? Is this somebody else? One case that I had was where a daughter, she stole $100,000 from her mother in a little over a year. where she was the power of attorney over the mom's finances. And this is where it's important to understand the actual documents. And the POA specifically stated that the monies from the victim, or that the victim had, could not be commingled, and that the attorney in fact had to use those monies for the sole benefit of the victim. So through that, I had to prove that the suspect commingled the money, which she did, and that she did not use the money for the benefit of the victim, which I did. So she had transferred money into her own account and used that money to pay for a horse, dining, travel, etc. And none of that money went to the victim, even though that the assisted living, or the mental health place, memory care unit, had requested that she needed clothing, toiletries, furniture, and none of that was provided to the victim. So in a sexual assault case, is the victim incapable of consent? Or is the victim developmentally disabled? Was it by forcible compulsion? Is the suspect a health care provider? Does the suspect have supervisory authority over the victim? Or was the suspect providing transportation to the victim in the course of their job when this sexual assault occurred? Obviously, there's other things that go along with that that could be for a later class as far as actual rape or sexual assault, but that would be for a different time. So going from there, what does the officer need to do from that point? Well, documentation needs to be completed. So if a report is going to be generated, or if the officer determines that a crime has occurred, then a crime report will be generated and forwarded to the major crimes supervisor. If the officer determines that no crime has occurred, a general information report will be generated and sent to APS and to the major crimes unit. The officer will then notify Adult Protective Services via phone call or fax so that an APS investigator can be assigned. Per our policy here at Vancouver Police Department, that we will always notify Adult Protective Services when there is reasonable belief that abandonment, abuse, financial exploitation, sexual assault, physical assault, or neglect of a vulnerable adult has occurred. This is paramount because of the fact that we want to work in partnership with our community partners in tackling the crimes against the vulnerable adults or the elderly to assist them. Now we get into the Adult Protective Services. So the officer has finished what they do, and now Adult Protective Services has been notified. The great thing about this is that you have two prongs to protect a victim. You have the criminal side, which is law enforcement, and then you also have the Adult Protective Services side, which will assist on the civil side of that. Each side has its own pluses as far as how to either get services or assistance to the victim. Adult Protective Services is, they receive it, they will initiate a referral, and the investigator will have in Washington State either a 24-hour, a 5-day, or a 10-day tickler to say when they have to meet with the victim. The great thing is that the Adult Protective Services is in the later slide here, is actually housed with us. So some of the resources that are available, I have listed some of the ones that are national as well as local for us. The Adult Protective Services has the ability to provide care either through actual, it's called care here, COPES, through other agencies that are associated with Adult Protective Services for the assistance of vulnerable adults. And I need to clarify that Adult Protective Services here is only looking at the vulnerable adults, not necessarily just because the person is 60 years of age or older. The Senior Resource Alliance is just that. It's a awesome website for helping people find information on such things as Medicare, Medicaid, housing, transportation, healthcare, and just a general welfare. The National Council on Aging is a website for 3 different categories of helping the elderly or vulnerable adults plus caregivers. For professionals looking to enhance what they do, and then also for advocates who are there to assist the elderly or vulnerable adults. The YWCA is obviously national, but here locally, they are a great asset as they have roots in the local community here, and they do an awesome job at assisting sexual assault victims and domestic violence victims. The Lutheran Community Services is something that is in the state of Washington. This is a nonprofit group that will assist crime victims and will not just be with them for a day or a month. They actually have connections with victims for up to 2, maybe even 3 years, assisting them on what they can do. Their funds are limited, but they have a lot of inroads to other organizations. The last one there, Lifeline Connections, is an organization, nonprofit, that is in Washington State and also in Oregon State that deals with substance abuse and mental health as far as for persons needing that. They have outpatient and inpatient treatment. They're another good resource. So I work in the Elder Justice Center here in Clark County. This is a unit that was created in 2011, which has a dedicated prosecutor, a dedicated city detective, myself. We have 2 adult protective service investigators with us, and also a victim advocate. All of us are housed on the same floor, the prosecutor's office, which enhances our communication and our ability to go through cases as I just walk across the hall to contact APS, or I just walk down the hall to get a hold of the prosecutor, or vice versa. They can come in and talk to me. The victim advocate as well in dealing with, once a case has been charged, then that person will be victim advocate will handhold, so to speak, the victim through the court process. I receive about 55 APS referrals a month and about 15 revolving criminal cases, so unfortunately there is no lack of work. We definitely need more education, as Brian has said, more people to investigate this, and so I just want to thank you all again for the opportunity, and I think I need to turn it over to Yolanda now.
Great, thank you guys. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and open the webinar up to Q&A, and we have some, I think, that we can start with, and I think for those of you who are still listening, if you have questions, go ahead and submit those, and we'll try to address them. So the first question, I think, relates to Brian's portion of the presentation, and the question is, what is boundary flexibility? Brian? Brian, are you there?
Sorry, what I'm talking about there is just simply the willingness to get out of one's office and one's traditional workspace and going into another workspace and allowing others to come into our workspace. It's easy, the analogy in higher education we often use, even though there are very few ivy towers, we say we need to get out of our ivory towers and go into the rest of the world. And so it's that sort of willingness to enter other types of arenas and engage in conversations and activities with people from other professions.
Great, thank you. All right, and then we had another question around whether or not there is a VAPO in place for Pennsylvania. I don't know, Brian or Mike, if either of you know.
I don't know.
Same with me. I don't know specifically for Pennsylvania.
Okay. And then another question, Mike, in relation to your presentation came in, are females more likely to be offenders?
I would say that overall, that would be correct, just as they're, through the cases that I've initiated, that the majority of them are female, but that doesn't mean that there aren't plenty of males that are suspects as well.
And if I could weigh in on that one also, the same, well, I said we shouldn't base our elder abuse models on child abuse models. There's an analogy here. When you look at the child abuse data, except for sexual abuse, most of the crimes are committed, most of the abuse cases are by mothers, and that's because mothers are doing the vast majority of care for children. And if we were going after neglect, then maybe fathers would be overrepresented there. But I use that analogy because in these cases, it is often caregiving situations where it's falling on daughters or older wives to provide care, and in those situations you're going to see women more often involved.
Well, and I think, Yolanda, maybe if the follow-up question there is for the female nurses.
Yeah, go ahead. So there's a follow-up question wondering if female nurses or family members are more likely to be offenders. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I don't know if it's just this area, but within the last probably 7 months, 8 months, I've had an uptick or a surge in female suspects that are caregivers, specifically certified nursing assistants, either stealing checks, writing themselves for $20,000, stealing rings for $15,000, going through other property, taking debit cards from victims. So there is that out there. I don't know, again, if that's just an anomaly, but it seems to be enhanced since prior to that.
And two, I would, the vast majority of folks in those professions are going to be females. One of the interesting things I found, this research was 20 years ago, but we found interesting gender patterns in nursing home situations where it was more likely to be males abusing males and females abusing females than any other dynamic. And we don't know why that happened. We were just looking at the official data. So there are some interesting gender patterns that are worth, I think, exploring.
Great. Okay. And then another question that came in, I think both of you could probably talk to it, is why do people glaze over sexual assault in the elderly population?
Well, I would say that I can't speak for everybody, but I would say that here in Vancouver that we don't glaze over it. Sexual assault is a serious crime, and we do take that seriously. In the community here, we have it set up to where if there is sexual assault, that rape advocates can be available from the YWCA. The victims have the ability to have somebody there with them. We do go to the hospital for a SANE nurse for a sexual assault examination. We go through and determine for a search warrant in regards to victims' houses, the locations where it occurred, stuff like that. Unfortunately, that the way that some sexual assault cases are is that it comes down to a he said, she said, and those by themselves are difficult to prove outside of any direct physical evidence. Brian, if you got anything else.
Yeah, I would agree that I do not think at all that the justice system glazes over the cases. I do think there is a tendency by researchers and professors. I know I've done a little bit of research in the area, but just looking at the research on sexual abuse in general, most of it does target the younger population, and we don't give attention to the types of offenses that occur later in the life course. And they do occur, and they are different than the kind of sexual assaults that you would see happening early in the life course. But in the justice system, when they get when these cases come to their attention, I don't see any type of backing off whatsoever.
All right, great. Okay, so unfortunately we're at the end of our time. So I just wanted to remind everyone real quickly that you are able to view this webinar. It was recorded. You can either go to the OVC TAC.gov site that's under the notes section, or it should be posted on elderjustice.gov along with a copy of the slides. And then if we couldn't get to your question, or if you have other specific questions, please feel free to email the address on the slide right now, elder.justice@usdoj.gov, and we will try to get back to you. Thanks again for participating. We hope you found this useful.
Thank you.